Welcome to the video demonstration for the third lab in the FortiAnalyzer course, Device Registration. My name is Bob Cunningham, and I am an instructor here at Fortinet. In this video, we're going to look at how to register devices on FortiAnalyzer and troubleshoot the device communication. Let's dive in, and we're going to start, if you're following along the lab guide for 6.4, we're starting on page 50, and the first thing they ask us to do is to restore a configuration file on the ISFW. So let's go ahead here to that device and come up here to where it says admin configuration restore. And I'll choose to upload here from the resources, FortiAnalyzer Lab3, and ISFW configuration. And it's going to go ahead and reboot, and we're going to go on to the next step here, which is to restore the configuration for the local FortiGate. So similarly, we'll come up here to System, to Configuration, and Restore, Upload, Resources, FortiAnalyzer, Lab3, and Local FortiGate Configuration. And we'll wait for the two firewalls to finish rebooting, and we'll resume the lab once that takes place. All right. Our two firewalls have rebooted. Now it's time to log into our FortiAnalyzer. Admin password. Let's see here. Now we're going to select the ADOM number 2 for this particular lab, or this particular section of the lab. And that's going to make our remote FortiGate register into ADOM 2. We'll select the device manager here. And we'll configure the following sessions on here. We're going to add a device, following information in there, I should say. We need an IP address, so the IP address they give us is 10.200.3.1. Now we need to put the serial number of the firewall. This is be the remote firewall, so let's come over here and click on the remote firewall tab, and we see its serial number is FGVM01 000006536. So let's go ahead and put that back over here. This field is required. FGVM 01 2 3 4 5 zeros 65036. And let me just go back and check that one more time. FGVM 01 1 2 3 4 5 0 65036. Looks good. We want to give it a device name of remote-FortiGate. The firmware version we're going to choose will be that's the model, sorry. The firmware version we're going to choose is 6.4, and description is optional. So let's click next. and it's busy creating, retrieving information, and we'll click, let's wait till it tells us it's successfully, device data successfully, use the status, good. And let's click finish. And there we are. Everything looks good here except for the logs. We see there's a indication of problems with the logs, but we're going to troubleshoot that a bit later on. In the meantime, we have pre-configured when we added in those configuration files for the ISFW and the local FortiGate. We were pre-configuring the configuration file already had set up the security fabric. So let's go ahead and look at the local FortiGate, and we're going to go to security fabric, and we're going to take a look at fabric connectors. And we're going to take a look at the FortiAnalyzer logging. Highlight that and click Edit. Everything is set up properly here. We could run a test connectivity. It says it's connected, but it's unauthorized, and that's what it should say. Let's go ahead and go back to the now the ISFW. Same thing. We're going to come over to the security fabric here. And we're going to look into the fabric connectors. And again, highlight the logging. Again, view it. It looks like it's all set there as well. It's going to pull down the information from the root. We can test the connectivity. It should also say unauthorized. It does. So let's go ahead and then go back to our FortiAnalyzer. And we have to log back into our FortiAnalyzer now. Now we're going to select the root because all authorizations are made to the root FortiAnalyzer. We'll select Device Manager. And you'll see up here in the right-hand corner, there's an notification. And we see we have some unauthorized devices listed here. Let's click on this message. And we see we have some unauthorized devices here. We'll select both of these devices, and we will select Authorize. The authorization window opens up, and instead of adding these to the root, we're going to add them to ADOM1. Select OK. Close that. Since we have placed these two devices into ADOM1, let's go ahead and switch over from the root ADOM to ADOM1. And you'll see that next to the remote FortiGate, there is a yellow triangle. When I highlight over it, it tells me that I need to authenticate. So I click on that. The username, as you recall, is admin. The password is password. And now both devices have authenticated and they're receiving logs. But you'll remember that back over in ADOM2, we have a device that was not receiving logs. So our next task is going to be to troubleshoot that. Many of the commands we're going to use and tools we're going to use to troubleshoot logging are going to be CLI commands. So let's open up a command line window with the prompt we have right here, the CLI console. And then let's make that a full tab by clicking over here to where this little breakout button is. This is detach. First command we're going to look at is to diagnose, it's to list the devices. So it's diagnose DVM, which is device manager, device list. We'll give that a few seconds. There we go. And we can see here that we've got the internal segmentation firewall associated with ADOM1. The local FortiGate associated with ADOM1. The remote FortiGate associated with ADOM2. So it looks like we see a list of all the devices that we know are established. We can check out their IP addresses: 10.200.3.1, 10.0.1.254, 10.0.1.200. So at this point, we can see that the remote FortiGate is talking to FortiAnalyzer. So whatever problems we're having logging, it's not because the two can't communicate. Let's go ahead and go back to the remote FortiGate. Let's open up the command line here as well. Let's again make this a full screen. And we're going to run a command, execute log FortiAnalyzer test connectivity. And it says that no FortiAnalyzer is enabled. That's interesting. Worth exploring. Let's compare this with the output that we get from the ISFW. And again, the console, and again, I'm going to make it full. And maybe I wouldn't do this if this was a real situation, but I want to be able to demonstrate these side by side. And again, the same command. The thinking here is, since this one's working, does it give us the very same display, or is there something else going on here? And it says that not only is the device registered, but connection is allowed. Now, it didn't tell us that this is a very different display than we had over here. No FAS enabled. So at this point, we pretty much know that logging connectivity is not enabled on this remote FortiGate. So let's look at a few commands to see if we can further commands that we might use to reach the same conclusion and perhaps give us some additional hints. Let's jump over to the FortiAnalyzer, still in the command line, and we're going to type in some diagnose. We're going to tell it diagnose debug application OFTPD. Optimized File Transfer Protocol daemon, the process that a Unix or Linux box runs. OFTPD. Number 8 is the level, and the IP address is 10.200.3.1. And now, so this set up a filter. What we want to actually be debugging for, and now it's diagnose, debug, enable. And we'll just wait a moment. And we don't see anything. So we're not seeing any logs coming in from that IP address. Let's run the same command, but this time on the IP address for the internal segmentation firewall. So the IP address here is 10.0.1. So 10.0.1.200. That's our filter. And diagnose, debug, enable. And right away we start seeing traffic. We should see some more traffic here, but there's not much happening on these boxes. So let's jump over to the ISFW and let's run this command, diagnose log test, just to generate some logs and confirm that we're seeing actual logs coming from this box, and we'll hopefully generate those logs, and we'll see them over here on the FortiAnalyzer. We're definitely seeing traffic here coming from that 10.0.1.200, in part because we have a filter set up there, and in part because if we looked in here and stopped this for a little bit, we would be able to see traffic that was coming to us from that IP address. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop the debug here. Diagnose, debug, disable is the command to do that. Now I feel a little bit like one of those murder mysteries where you know in the first 15 minutes who the killer is, and everybody else pretends not to know, so we can get through the rest of the mystery. I'm sure you've been thinking, as I thought the first time I looked at this, hey, why don't we go back to the remote FortiGate and see if it's configured to send logs? Excellent idea. Let's do that right now. We're going to come in here under Security Fabric, under Fabric Connectors. And oh, look at that. FortiAnalyzer logging is disabled. What a shock. Let's go ahead and configure this, enable it. And that means we got to give it an IP address. Remember the IP address of the FortiAnalyzer, 10.200.1.210. Let's do real time. We can disable the certificate, or verifying the certificate, and click OK. And now it says it's logging. So let's go over to the FortiAnalyzer. Let's close this up out of the way and give this a moment to. And there we go. It's logging. We fixed the problem. And that is the end of Lab 3. Please join us on the recording for Lab 4, where we'll examine logs and event handlers and disk quotas and all kinds of exciting topics about FortiAnalyzer logs.